It's not just what multiple an acquirer is applying to a business, it's what is that multiple applied to? What is the adjusted EBITDA that it is applied to? I'm Arthur Petropoulos, managing partner here at Hillview Partners. We're a middle market, lower middle market, M&A, capital advisory, investment banking firm, helping companies typically generating $1 million to $10 million a year, pre-tax earnings or EBITDA, sell their businesses or secure capital. And so the phrase in investment banking, in private equity, when it comes to mergers and acquisitions, is always what was the EBITDA, what was the adjusted, what was the normalized EBITDA of the company? And people will always ask and say, what exactly is EBITDA? You know, when looking at a business, when running a business, we typically say, okay, you have sales, you have the cost of goods sold, you have the gross profit, then you have the operating expenses, and when you minus or subtract the operating expenses from the gross profit, you have the net income. Now, how does net income turn into this EBITDA, this adjusted EBITDA thing people keep talking about? Well, let's talk about that a little bit in today's video. Not just how is EBITDA constructed from a technical or financial perspective, but what other things it tends to include, what is it actually trying to portray, and why does it even matter for the value of a business? And so EBITDA, from the financial textbook perspective, stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Now, these are a series of non-cash or company-specific items that we'll get into as we dig further into. But what is EBITDA trying to actually delineate or illustrate? It's the cash flow generating power of a business in the hands of a future acquirer. And so when we are selling a business and an acquirer says, what is the EBITDA, what is the cash flow of the company? Really what we want to paint is, what would that be for a future acquirer of a company, not necessarily the present owner of a business, because there's slightly different objectives. Owners of companies, particularly when it's family owned, when it's entrepreneur owned, when it's owned by, say, less than 10 investors, there are objectives other than just maximizing EBITDA for a particular year. There's the optimization of tax exposure. There's redeploying certain capital into growth initiatives, trying out different things. People aren't running a business to maximize their taxes when they own it. And so when you sell a company, certain things have to be reworked or re-illustrated in order to show an accurate portrayal of the earnings power or the cash flow generating power of a business. And we'll get to why that's important. But basically, let's take 5 categories of adjustments that take that net income number that we talked about earlier and create the adjusted EBITDA figure. So the first of these is going to be non-cash items. And this is where you have depreciation and amortization. So when we said interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, we would add back depreciation and amortization, which are accounting figures that are supposed to approximate the wear or the depreciation, the lessening of the durable life of equipment that you have in a business. And this can be for multiple different things. And even buying a company, you could have the amortization of goodwill. There's a lot of technical elements, but depreciation and amortization are non-cash items. And so you want to add back, obviously, the non-cash expenses to more accurately portray the cash flow generating power of the business. Now, the second category are going to be business-specific or ownership-specific items. And so this tends to be the interest or the taxes. So depending on what kind of structure someone owns a business in, there's going to be certain types of taxes or not. If it's a pass-through entity as a S Corp, LLC versus a C Corp, but really that shouldn't have any bearing on the cash flow generating power of business. Similarly is interest. If you have a lot of debt on the company, well, the future owner may not. So if you're paying lots of interest, that should not detract from, again, the cash flow generating power of the business. And so, again, we want the purest essence, if you will, distilled of what the company generates in terms of cash flow. And so you have, again, revenues, expenses, profit. And we want to add back to that profit first the non-cash items, then the owner-specific items. Next, category number 3 are going to be non-recurring items. If there's a one-time litigation fee, if there's a one-time severance fee, if there's a one-time the roof caved in fee, if there's a one-time the software fell apart fee. Now again, you'll get into debates, if you will, with acquirers of saying, hey, this is a recurring, non-recurring, but if it can be delineated as a non-recurring kind of one-off anomalous event, our goal is to add that back because it's not an accurate portrayal of what future expenses or future cash flow are going to look like. Category number 4 are right-sizing items. And so let's say a business is owned by one person, his sister, and his brother. And so the 3 of them kind of passively run the business, but each of them draws $250,000 a year as a salary. is it accurate to say that the future owner or management of the company is going to need a salary of $750,000 to run the business in the way it is? And the answer is no. And so if the market would dictate that a manager, if you will, a general manager for a company like this, or a portfolio level type of executive for a business like this would take a salary of $200,000, then we would right size the salary expense line item from $750,000 to $200,000, which would put $550,000 back into the EBITDA. Similarly, when there are situations like that, you can then go through benefits and retirement plans and payroll taxes, but all things to normalize it for one singular manager that would be a full-time presence. And so again, you'd go through the financial statement and look for all situations like that. Now, lastly, are going to be personal items. Let's say in that situation, there's 3 people and each of them have a 5 Series BMW having all of their lease payments run through the business. If it's not typical of a person running a business like that to have an auto expense, or maybe there'd only be one, then you'd add back the personal expenses. Again, you see this in meals, you see it in travel, you see it in lots of different categories. Again, oftentimes the operating of a business is in part to minimize the tax burden. And so if there are certain personal expenses that find their way to the corporate P&L, then we would scrape those out, again, to show a more accurate portrayal. And so when we ultimately illustrate the adjusted EBITDA of the business, we create what's called an EBITDA bridge. We show the net income. So again, that's your revenue less COGS equals gross profit minus operating expenses equals net income on one side. Then we show the adjustments that we're making to that net income. Then we show the adjusted figures, or the adjusted EBITDA. And so what we like to do is just go line by line through the P&L, and then every time there's an adjustment made, we mark it, and then we leave a note saying which of these 5 categories it falls into. And then we present to the world an adjusted EBITDA. And so at least any prospective acquirer or capital provider looking at a business is going to say, hey, how did you come up with this adjusted EBITDA number? Well, here's the bridge, and you can tie it back to the P&L, to the financial statements, and people can argue the veracity or how aggressively you're characterizing the adjusted EBITDA, but they can't argue that the numbers don't add up, and that's a big point in doing this correctly. And so, okay, we have gone from net income to adjusted EBITDA. Have we done this just for our own posterity and so that we can walk around and say how smart we are? No, there is a pragmatic reason for doing this. And that is, if you are characterizing a business to show the true cash flow generating power of that business, and again, someone is going to apply a multiple to the business based on their needed returns, based on what the market indicates, based on, as we've alluded to in many of our other videos, what the access of the company is, what the capabilities of the company are. If they're applying a multiple to a business, then you want that multiple to be applied to the highest number possible to yield the ultimate value of a business. We've talked to people before who said, I sold my business for 7 times. And we said, 7 times what? And they said, well, 7 times the net income of my company of $2 million. And so we sold the business for $14 million. Well, that seems like a lot of money, and it certainly is. If we then ask, what kind of add backs did you apply? And you start getting that there really wasn't that many add backs, you can almost guarantee that that $2 million of EBITDA might have been $3 million of EBITDA with the right work done to normalize it and adjust it in a way that truly scrapes out all of the, again, 5 categories of items. And so pragmatically speaking, if the real adjusted EBITDA that the market would have accepted was $3 million and you sold it for $14 million, we're only talking about a 4 2/3 multiple when they believe that they sold the company for 7 times. Whereas if you adjusted the EBITDA to $3 million, even if the market applied a 6 times multiple to 3, you would have an $18 million valuation versus a $14 million valuation. So multiples are not the end all be all. It's what are you applying the multiple to? And that is the magic, that is the importance, that is the significance of normalizing EBITDA when you're presenting a company to the acquisition or capital space. Let's run through those one more time. When adjusting net income into adjusted EBITDA, 5 categories that you really want to pay a lot of attention to. 1 is going to be the non-cash items. 2 is going to be the business or owner specific items. 3 is going to be the non-recurring items. 4 is going to be the right sizing items for what future kind of post-transaction ownership management operations are going to look like. And 5 are going to be the personal items that can be scraped out of the business. If you can portray the most accurate, the most potent cash flow generating power of the business to then apply the multiple to in the context of also highlighting the access and capabilities of the company, that's where you maximize value of a business. And that's what we do every day for our clients. And so that's a thought for today. Hope the week's going well for everyone. Keep pushing forward. God bless. We'll see everyone next time.